Hello and welcome to another questionable episode of the Hellion Rebellion Rock and Roll Association, brought to you by Holly Geist. That's me. So I wore this t-shirt on my last episode, and you know what we do. We do moments of silence. I had to dig this t-shirt out of the dirty clothes to wear it once again because we lost Mark Adams this week, who was a co-founder and bass player for the mighty St. Vitus. I have loved this band since probably the album 5. So let's go ahead and give Mr. Mark Adams a moment of our respect. Okay. May the land of heaven be doomier and gloomier now that Mark Adams has passed beyond its threshold. So tonight we're going to talk about a hardcore punk rock act that comes out of the great city of St. Louis, Missouri. A band known as Pinkville. Pinkville has been around for roughly 3 years now. 2000 and I want to say 18, maybe 19. They are still going strong today. Fairly young band. I think this is their first proper 7-inch. I know they have some demos and things of that nature prior to this. They are on the record label Records, one of my favorite record labels that comes out of that city. And that's all I have to really tell you about them. Again, they're fairly young, fairly new. God, I really didn't want to go here with this, but you see a lot of this these days. A lot of that hammer and sickle stuff these kids like to throw in our faces. A lot of these bands, they're fighting or representing the working class, being raised by the working class. And when you do that, you have my attention. I love like a lot of the oi bands that represent the same thing. I think it's fascinating that a lot of these groups nowadays will use this communist symbology to represent that. Though I don't truly believe that these people are true communists. But here's a brief history lesson. Pinkville is a piece of land that was in between North Vietnam and South Vietnam. It was called Pinkville by U.S. soldiers because of the Viet Cong who had strongholds in that area of the Vietnam War. The Viet Cong were the southern Vietnamese who agreed with the northern Vietnamese and would eventually bring us into this war. So, in the beginning, you have Lyndon, what was his name, Johnson, who really escalated this war, really promoted it, and most of the United States was actually behind the Vietnam War when it first started. We had just gotten done with the Red Scare and McCarthyism of the 1950s, and here's a great example of communism moving into another country. we have to stop the spread of communism. So, we get involved with Vietnam. And in the beginning, U.S. soldiers, the U.S. military are advisors to the southern Vietnamese. But the Viet Cong would be, again, they would be the people who would bring us into this war, and we would start fighting this war because of them. And Pinkville was the area that saw most of the violence, most of the bloodshed, everything you see in documentaries, movies. They're talking about this area of Vietnam. The problem with Pinkville is that you had a situation where there were a lot of U.S. troops stationed in one area, and they became convinced that this entire village or this area were just filled with Viet Cong, and they would massacre over 500 men, women, and children. And it's one of the biggest, probably the biggest war crime during the Vietnam War committed by American soldiers or the U.S. government, however you want to look at that. I think it was called the Mila massacre. I think is what that was called. Now you got to remember, the Vietnam War was the first war in the history of the human race where it was being videotaped every single day and night. It was being injected into everybody's beautiful television boxes every single day and night. And it was interesting, even to other countries who weren't involved in this war, because nobody had ever seen war before. And it's not the glorious, beautiful thing that you read in history books. Look at the Vietnam War. This is what it looks like. So this would prompt uh, the anti-war movement in the United States, which at the same time you have the civil rights movement going on. And so with the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement going on, all intermingling, everybody starts protesting and revolting. They're saying, bring the soldiers home. We don't want to be involved in this anymore. Nobody cares. Um, Johnson would be booted. They would vote in Nixon, who would promise to bring soldiers home. But again, Nixon is on the extreme, right of politics. So a lot of these anti-war protesters voted for Nixon, but he's also trying to hold on to the extreme right evangelical people of the United States, because they voted for him because that's the kind of politics that he does. And so this guy's political career is kind of screwed from the beginning. But in the beginning, he's kind of considered a great president and a hero because he's doing the right thing. But authority is coming down on all these hippies and beatniks and anybody protesting, and they're saying they're anti-America, they're anti-authority, they're all communists. If you're against the war, you're communist, and they're putting them in jail, and they don't care if they're fighting for, nuclear disarmament or for peace, bring the soldiers home, or if they're fighting because they're black and their right to vote. They don't care at this time. Their authority is just coming down on the general populace. And this is what Pinkville created in the 1960s. And now you get a whole new generation of kids out here with a whole new punk rock mentality who really who grew up with a more in-depth education and history of the Vietnam War, where me growing up, I think we went up to Reagan and the Cold War, and it was Vietnam was kind of a brief thing, and you just hit the dates and hit the names, and let's move on to this. But modern days, these kids are getting a way more in depth education with this 1960s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and so now you're getting this whole new mentality, this whole new revolution going on in our country where these kids are beginning to use these symbols. And for the most part, it's shock again. But what I think they're actually saying is look at, look at Vietnam. I mean, you fought over an ideal. You didn't get anything. Look at all the murder. Look at all the people we lost. Look at all the money we lost. Uh, it was a horrible idea. Why did we do it? We didn't get anything out of it. And to use this communist, you know, the hammer and sickle or symbology or workers' rights and all this type of shit. I mean, it's really it's their way of sticking it to Washington. It's their way of sticking it to the man. It's their way of saying, screw authority. You're full of shit. And this country is once again in the middle of a red scare. We're red baiting every single day on in the media. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, every Democrat is a communist, and you got the Trump people who this dude actually has assets in Russia. But I mean, are these kids communists? They're not really communists. I mean, if they're communists, they'd be pro-Russia over or Ukraine. What do you ask them? I'm all about Russia. Oh yeah, bring back the Soviet Union. Can't wait. They're not communists. It's bullshit. It's just shock. And what this band brings to the table, more than a lot of the other bands, is that these guys come from the middle of America, from St. Louis, Missouri. This is a city that is purple at best. They're not from San Francisco. They're not from Toronto. They're not from Paris, where something like that is probably a little bit more tolerated. This is shocking to people in the Midwest of the United States. This is shocking to people in the southern United States. It pisses them off. And you know what? Good. That's what good punk rock is supposed to do. And you know what? It's on the record. How about we let the record speak? Because that's why we're here in the first place. Let's check out Pinkville.
At Attica, New York State Prison, more than 1,000 inmates erupted in a volcanic orgy of mayhem, arson, and hostage seizure. It took 97 hours to quell the rioters. When it was over, the death count was 43, 32 inmates and 11 employees. Prone or dead, they lie. Their actions were frustrated, break down those prison walls. Their patience was suspended, break down those prison walls. They suffered years of abuse, break down those prison walls. The time they could choose, the choice to fight through, break down those prison walls. So we got to go against the soldiers and fight back. The teachers that had a confidence in America. So we got to go against the soldiers and fight back. The teachers that say there was something they could hear us. Against the bullets, break down from our heart, break down those prison walls. Casualties of the reservoir, break down those prison walls. Prisoners of war, we fought for the flag, break down those prison walls. Beaten and murdered, we take just to have, break down those prison walls. So we got to go against the soldiers and fight back. The teachers that had a confidence in America. So we got to go against the soldiers and fight back. The teachers that say there was something they could hear us. Break down those prison walls. Break down those prison walls. Break down those prison walls.
Wages are low, don't have a check. This one day and there's no going back. Get on the line, get on the line, get on the line, you're now on your time. Get on the line, get on the line, get on the line, you're now on your time. No money for rent, no money for you. Just money for taxes. Top in your hair, it's not the phone. You got money, property, working for home. Get on the line, get on the line, get on the line, you're now on your time. Get on the line, get on the line, get on the line, you're now on your time.
Ooh, that stings. That just stings. Man, kids are saying something to these days, aren't they? Kind of reminds me of Anti-Flag. That's what this band sort of reminds me of. Okay, let's listen to the second side. He's my guitar hero.
Fly off the TV just to lay in that selection. Give it, secrets
So yeah, there's Pinkville from St. Louis, Missouri. One of their great punk rock exports right now. Yeah, I need to see this band live. Great band. And remember, the Pinko commies are coming, and they're coming for you, and they're coming for your children. And they're going to turn you all into mindless zombies who want to stand in a bread line. That's what they're going to do. God bless you.